Hey everyone, welcome to today's class. My name is Megan and I'm the instructor. I'm the owner of Paint and Sip BT and Painting with Megan. Some of you may have been here before, so welcome back. And some of you may be new. So if you are joining us right now, feel free to post your name and where you're logging in from in the chat window. We'd love to get to know you and give you a warm welcome. I have a little tickle in my throat, so I apologize in advance, but I'm so glad that you're here with us tonight. I do have tea with me. So as we get going, I will share a little bit about the supplies that we're going to be using for tonight's class as we kick things off here right at the top of the hour. But a warm welcome. There is a chat window if you want to drop in your name and where you're from. We'd love to hear from you. If not, you're likely getting your supplies together. So that's absolutely fine. But welcome and thank you for being here. I will share the supplies as we get going, and then we can formally kick things off at the top of the hour. I am using acrylic paints tonight, so I will be using primary colors of red, blue, and yellow, and I always have black and white with me handy. Some of you may have basic paints. That's absolutely fine. Some of you may have other paints. Whenever you join my classes, I always encourage you just to use whatever supplies you have, because this is an opportunity for you to really just take some time for yourself. Everyone's at different levels of painting abilities. Some of you may not have painted for a long time, and some of you may not paint that often, maybe every month or so, maybe every once a year. It's so different for everyone. So these classes are designed for you to just show up with no matter where you're at with your skills, and we keep it really easy and light. Some of our classes are a little easier. Some of our classes are a little bit more intermediate. So wherever you are, just do your best and have some fun and try not to take it too seriously. We're here just to really give back a little bit of time for ourselves. So that's the overall goal. And the more you join and the more you paint with us, you'll be able to practice new techniques and learn a little bit more about your own paint style, which is really fun. So I'm excited to have you here. All right. So I'm going to be painting with you here, and I'll do some adjustments for our Facebook Live class today. But I'm glad you're here with us. If you wanted to grab a cup of tea to make yourself a little more comfortable, you may, but I'm going to be painting right here with you along the way. And I have our inspiration printed over here. We're going to be doing a really beautiful, simple bird scene within a fall setting. So it's going to have like dark gray backgrounds, and then it's going to have some really soft red leaves in the background. And we're going to kind of layer our way forward. So it'll be really beautiful. But we'll primarily be using blacks and whites for today's class, as well as reds and yellows. And we'll be mixing some grays. So if you want to bring in any other colors for your bird, my bird's going to be a golden color. You could do that. And then we're going to be using some of the reds and blood orange reds for the leaves. So it's going to have great dark contrast in the background, beautiful bright leaves, and some subtle leaves as well. And then a beautiful golden bird with some really beautiful lighting on the top of the bird's chest. So, excuse me, we will get started in just a moment. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know. If you would like to, in the chat window, write your name and where you're from. I'd love to know a little bit about you and where you're joining us from tonight. And if you've taken any of my classes before, I'm sure some of you certainly have. This class was actually opened up for all of our Patreon members and all of the public as a really fun treat. So if you're new, welcome. I always love having new folks join us. And if you're existing, so glad to have you back. I'm sure we have a few existing folks with us here. All right. So we're going to start in just a moment. Feel free to get the supplies that you need. All right. So the supplies for tonight's class, I'm using acrylic paints. And I mentioned that I have red, yellow, and blue for all my classes. one of the things I do is I'll teach you how to blend and mix colors. So everybody shows up to these classes with different paints, different paint qualities, and different paint sets, really. You don't need a fancy paint set to join my classes. Just show up with whatever you have, and I will give you ideas and teach you how to mix different colors along the way. You can pick and choose what colors are best for you. Excuse me. In addition to my paint in itself, I have an array of brushes, which you can see here. I have a big brush. I have some smaller brushes, all for lots of detail work. So just use and grab whatever brushes you have for our class tonight. You can grab a really big brush. You can grab a medium-sized brush. Just have an array. You know, I'll probably use 3 brushes the whole class, so you don't need anything too fancy. Hello, welcome, Cameron. So glad you're here. We're just going over a list of supplies. I also have you need a small plate to mix your paints on. I'm using acrylic. This is actually palette paper, so I can actually put paints right on this paper and then throw it away, which is kind of neat. So if you don't have palette paper, which you may not, just grab a paper plate or a dinner plate for the class tonight. And then I always have a paper towel handy for any messes. If you've just joined us, go ahead and drop in your name and where you're from. I always love welcoming you folks. All right, so paper towel for messes, a cup of water to rinse your brushes. And then I'm painting on an easel tonight, and I'm painting on an 11 by 14 canvas panel. These are tremendous. They're awesome because you can stick them in a frame like I have here after a class, which is really nice. And I love swapping out those things. Welcome, Margaret. I love this. Margaret has joined us for AARP classes in the past. Awesome. I'm so glad you're here. All right. Again, apologies for my cough. It is lingering, but we'll be just fine. We'll get through this here together. Excuse me. All right. So our inspiration is actually right over here. It's a bird with a beautiful background, and we're going to keep this nice and easy for everyone. So the first thing that we're going to do to get started is you get to pick the orientation of your canvas. So for tonight, I'm going to use portrait, which is a vertical perspective, and we are going to use black and white to make a gray, but we're going to pepper in a few like red leaves along the way too, but we're going to make it fairly subtle, okay? If anyone has any questions through today's class, do not hesitate to ask. Usually my classes are about an hour and a half to 2 hours. It's based on the complexity. But I just want you to know going into this, everyone who joins these classes is at different skill levels. So some of you may want to take a little longer. Some of you may be pretty speedy. So I try to find a happy medium to cover all the basics. But if you want to spend more time after tonight's class to do more work, you absolutely can do that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be painting the background. I have my brushes, and we're going to, excuse me, mixing a gray color together. So I'm going to take my black and put a little bit of black paint using my big brush on my plate over here. And I'm just mixing this around a little bit. All right, I'm just going to do a dollop of black on my palette. And I'm going to make it just be a little gray. So to make something gray, oh, I'm already getting messy. Paper towels are really handy for all those messes. So to make a little bit of a gray, I'm making a dark gray color. I want the background to be fairly dark. I'm just going to take a little bit of white and mix it in with the gray. Now, or in the black. I'm just going to put a little spot of white on my plate. And I usually do about a quarter's worth of paint. You really don't need a lot of paint in these classes. So just know if you don't have a lot of paint at home, it's okay. Just use what you have and go from there. But I'm going to take a little bit of my white here, and I'm going to bring it into my black. I'm just going to make a dark gray color. Excuse me. And we always take our time just to mix the right colors, aka the colors that we actually like. I don't ever want you to go fast and mix colors you don't like because of the class. So we're going to paint the entire background this dark gray color. So there's no worries here. I'm just going to put the paint right on, and I'm going to do some horizontal brush strokes. If folks are joining us, go ahead in the chat window and drop in your name and where you're coming in from. We're doing a YouTube Live today, which is something new. So I'm giving it a shot. I'm excited to be here. Hopefully this is an easy, accessible way to access our classes. And this one's open up for the public. So if you're new, I encourage you to follow the channel. You get notifications on what else is coming up and when, and get access to additional classes in the future. You'll get notifications. There's a notifications bell you can click to get notifications, which is kind of neat. So one of the things that I'm doing is I am dipping my brush in a little bit of water to help spread this around. So this can be as as light or as like gray, gray as you wish. And if it has a little bit of an ombre, that's absolutely fine. So it has some darker grays and some lighter grays like mine, that's absolutely fine. A little water will help spread it around. And I'm just doing nice, smooth, horizontal brush strokes to fill the background. But this is where you can really, for yourself, just settle into the process. In these classes, I remind you to breathe and to not take your artwork so seriously, even though there's a lot of type A folks out there and you want to do well. I get that. But I'm here just to remind you this is for fun. And I'm just doing nice, smooth brush strokes. And I'm just going back, and the water is really my friend here. So I'm bringing in a little paint. I'm dipping my brush in a little water. I'm kind of wiping off the water droplets. Some of you may have your canvas flat on a table, which is fine. I paint often with my canvases flat. Some of you may be painting with your canvas on an easel. So set yourself up however you're most comfortable. There's no right or wrong. But to get nice smooth lines, you can just do some nice brush strokes from the left to the right. They can be continuous if you wish. Excuse me. I'm just going and getting a little bit more paint. And I'm really excited about this inspiration because it's going to have some beautiful contrast. It's really going to kick us off into the fall season here. I'm based in Vermont. And I have been, if you're new here, I've been teaching classes for over 7 years. And I teach a lot of virtual classes for the public, but I also do a lot of team building classes for companies of big and small sizes. So I mail paint kits all over the country. And I teach a lot of really fun classes for teams to mix up their day and to practice painting and to really see how their painting skills go. And it's a really fun experience and opportunity. But I love being here for my Patreon channel, where I have 2 monthly classes right now. And I do the private classes on top of that. So it's really fun to be here. I was able to leave my full-time job working for a corporate company to do this full-time. And it's an absolute blast because I get to give people an opportunity to do something different. And sometimes when we give ourselves to do something a little bit different, there's a little bit of growth that happens over time. Now, it may not happen initially, but the more you give yourself an opportunity to do something different, you will stretch yourself in some way. And then something new may click in your life. You may say, wow, I really like painting, or, oh, I'm feeling a little more creative today. Or you might think creatively a little differently from a creative perspective. So there's a lot of benefits, a lot of therapeutic benefits that's built into this art creative experience. So again, I'm so glad that everybody's here with us tonight. And if you have any questions at all, do not hesitate to drop them in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on that for us. But you can see mine here. I'm just kind of working my colors down. I'm trying to make it even, but it has a little bit of different colors coming in, but that's okay. I'm happy with this. Excuse me. So I am using a little water to stretch this. So if you see any reflection, Yeah, so if mine is patchy, yes. If yours is totally solid, that's absolutely fine. I'm just playing with patchy colors tonight. So yes, if you have a solid dark gray, that's absolutely fine. No problem. This is just a background. We're just going to be layering details in on top of this. We're kind of setting the scene. So no worries. There is no right or wrong with regards to the texture or the consistency of the background, so don't worry about that. Some of you might be using a bigger brush than me, so it might be taking a little longer. Some of you might be just go at your own speed. Don't worry if you are behind or ahead. We do want these to dry entirely before we move on. So if anybody happens to have any thick paint, sometimes folks have thick paint, just use your brush and just go over it a few times. It will help it dry a little bit more quickly. If you wanted to add in any additional texture, you could always bring in a little bit more white to like make it look a little more streaky. That's absolutely fine. You can mix a little bit of a different gray color and kind of bring a different color in on top. That's one of the benefits of acrylic is that it dries quickly and you can kind of layer on top of it. One of the things I like highlighting in my classes is that we tend to do lots of layers on top of one another, and it is really beneficial to just know that your first layer isn't a one and done. We typically, our work evolves from there. So just know that, have a little patience with the process. And I'll remind you that throughout the class of having patience and just taking one step at a time, because our artwork does evolve in our classes. And if you've taken classes with me before, you know, we may be a quarter way through and you'd be like, Megan, what kind of journey are you taking me on right now? And I just say, trust the process. We're going to make something, this is going to turn into something really cool. And it typically does, but it's just about that process of layering, especially if you wanted to add more texture to this background, you could. It's just about being patient and letting that background dry, or even just considering doing a second layer of fun texture on top. So it's absolutely up to you. This is your process. I want you to know if you want to do anything a little different than what I'm doing. This, I always encourage, I call them rule breakers. If anybody wants to incorporate your own ideas, always in my classes, I want you to follow your own intuition. If you have an idea, I encourage you to incorporate it, because that's what creativity is all about. It's not about just following along with me. It's about getting going, you know, on that train and feeling empowered to make decisions of your own as you wish. And the more you paint and the more you're aware, you can be more open to that opportunity. But this is where we can just settle into the process. Take a couple deep breaths, and we're going to let our background dry for a minute. So mine is filled in. It has some funky texture. It's drying. If I see any wet spots, I'm just going to take my brush, and you can see there's no paint on it. I'm just going to do some brush strokes, horizontal brush strokes, to kind of work through any wetness that I see. That's going to help it dry more quickly. Okay. If you're painting on a canvas, be sure to get the edges, so the left and the right. You can always do this after too. Top and bottom. Again, I like to put my artwork in these frames and hang them in my studio. I love to rotate my artwork based on the classes I teach. It's really fun. Really fun. All right, so I'm going to give everybody a minute just to finish up your backgrounds. And if anyone has any questions along the way, do not hesitate to ask. I'm so glad you're here. All right. So we're going to let our canvases dry, and we're going to prepare for some of our next steps, which is really fun. You want to make sure you have, and if you need to take another minute or two, go for it. but I'm going to put a little bit more black paint on my canvas or on my palette over here. And mine's pretty dark. I have more of like, for me, I feel like it looks more of a black than a gray, and that's fine. The goal was to have a darker background. But we're going to put some black branches on top of this. Now, if you don't want to use black as a single color, you can use like a grayish blue branch maybe. So you want to be able to see some vertical branches coming in. Now you can use the chat window. If folks need another minute or two to finish your background or to let it dry, please let me know. Otherwise, we will jump right in to painting some of these branches as our next step. If your background's still a little bit wet, that's okay. Don't worry. Not a big deal. But we're going to do some black branches in the background. And then we're going to kind of work our way forward, which is going to be really fun. So for our black branches, I'm going to have folks grab your paintbrush. So you want a brush that has a nice fine edge. So you might have a square flat tip brush with a nice fine edge. You can see I'm holding this brush on the side. Excuse me. And it has a nice flat edge. I'm going to be using this for the branches. The branches are going to be long and skinny, and they're going to be vertical on this page. So I'm going to first do some dark gray branches vertically, and then we're going to do some black branches on top. So find a brush, and you might want to use a brush, that's like a fine point, round tip brush. You could use a round tip brush like this too. But we're going to do a dark gray first. So if you need to take a little bit of white and mix that with your black to make a dark gray, we're going to have 2 layers of branches here. And this is easy. It might sound hard, but you got this. It's no big deal. I'm mixing a dark gray, which is just black and a little bit of white. Same colors, whatever you have here. I have it on my brush. And we're going to do, on the left and the right side, we're going to do some long branches coming up. So this is so easy. Everybody's got this. We're going to do from the bottom all the way to the top, nice and thin. It can Y out a little bit. You want to keep the middle fairly open. You can add some secondary branches. We're going to do 3 on each side. And these are just long lines. Like there's branches. Excuse me. And if you want to do one that kind of comes across the middle and the back, you can. But we're going to try to stay on the sides. And if you want to have some that are overlapping, that's totally fine. This is really soft. So I'll bring it a little closer so you can see it. Really delicate. These are delicate details in the distance. Okay. So I did 1, 2, 3, and then I'm doing some just secondary branches coming off. So this is going to be kind of like almost blending in a little bit. These are not our primary branches. These are just details in the background. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So a little more paint. I'm going to go on the right side, go from the bottom all the way up to the top. I'm doing 3 on each side. Looks a little eerie, doesn't it, with Halloween here coming up. Start at the bottom. Go nice and slow if you need to. You can do some secondary branches by going off on the left first. If you want to have a little bit more of a natural hand, bring your brush a little back further in your hand. So you have a little more of a natural flex in your wrist. So I have 2 over here so far, and I'm just going to add 1 more. And they're overlapping one another, right? So these are just branches because our bird is going to be sitting on a branch. Bring this closer. This is just background detail. You can do low branches like this one on this side. So maybe I'll do a low branch here, coming in and across. That's absolutely fine. So these are just background details. So I did 3 branches on each side, and then we're going to have a little bit of fun here with our red. We're going to do some darker red leaves peppered in on some of these branches. And then we're going to do another layer of branches on top with some brighter red leaves. So we're going to have 2 tones of red leaves. Okay, it'll be really fun. So if you have any red at home, you may have crimson, which is like a darker red. You may have crimson. You may have like a, let me turn this down. You may have a barn red color here. You can kind of pick and choose what may be the best for you. I'm going to use probably the brighter red. And I'm going to put a little bit of that on my plate. And I'm going to mix just a little bit of gray with it. Because I wanted to darken it just a little bit to have a gray tone. And I'm going to grab a smaller brush for the leaves. So let's see here. I just have a small brush here. And the size brush I'm using, this is a 2/0 fraction brush. You can use like a 1 or a 2, and this is a round tip brush. Okay. So any small brush you have, I mean, any of these small brushes would work. You just want to have a brush that you feel comfortable with to do some of these. We're going to do long, skinny leaves today. There's a lot of different leaf styles. Excuse me. So I'm going to take a little bit of my red, and I'm actually just going to mix it over here with my gray to have a little bit of a darker red color. And this is a detail we don't have to do. I just think it's going to add a lot of character and a lot of value to the painting today. So I'm mixing like a dark gray reddish color. And I'm going to use my brush, and I'm just going to add them. I'm going to pepper in little leaves. The middle we're going to keep totally clear primarily for the bird. So if you put your hand in the middle of the canvas, just don't put any red leaves there, okay? We're going to put leaves kind of all around it. So I'm going to, and primarily we're going to start at the top, and we're just going to do a few kind of tucked in. So I'm going to just do some long red leaves. Maybe there's a little point. Just a little bit of character, a little bit of some darker leaves tucked in. And these little flowers or leaves, you can have a little point on them, but I have a style that they're like a 1, 2, 3. So you want whatever leaf shape you decide to do. These are kind of long, skinny leaves. You can do some shorter leaves and some longer leaves. You can do little clusters. See how we're just adding in these as little bits of detail? Our other leaves that we're going to be adding in are going to be much brighter. So this is just a detail in the distance. It's going to look really nice to come through at the end. And I have like a red brick color, but my other red's going to be much brighter than this. So I'm just peppering in long, and they're up kind of vertical. And you can add little leaves. You can add some big leaves. This is all just for fun perspective. I'm kind of going on the left and the right, and I am kind of alternating from the left and the right, but I'm also staggering them on each side, and I'm keeping the middle open. And you can just do little bits and dots, like if you want to just do little bits and accents here and there. You can see that there. So it looks very dark right now. Don't worry. These are all just details in the distance. We are going to add a lot more personality to this. I'm not going to add too many of these, but we're just getting going here. We are going to add some primary branches in the middle for the bird to sit on as our next step. So our process for today, and I'm not going to add any more because I have plenty, and I'll bring it a little closer again. Our process for today is starting in the background and working our way to the foreground. So we did a back layer of branches and leaves, and then we're going to be doing another layer of darker black branches on top of this with brighter leaves. And then we'll put our bird in soon here, I promise. Okay. So I'm going to keep that there. And again, I didn't do too many red leaves. If I want to go back in and modify some of these, that's fine. Some of you may be very detail oriented and you may want to spend a little bit extra time. That's absolutely fine. Sometimes I like to take a little bit of an impressionistic approach, if you've taken my classes before, that these look like leaves to me. So any way you want to approach these details, that's fine. I try to keep it on the easier side for folks. Again, the simple leaf shape in this regard is just a little bit of a point on top and then a long skinny leaf body. All right. So again, I didn't spend too much time there. Whenever you're done with your brushes, you can always take your cup and just clean off your brushes along the way so your paint doesn't dry to your brushes. Sometimes we forget to wash them along the way. I'm here to remind you of that. And we're going to move to the next step, which is really fun. We're going to put in we'll put in the bird's body as our next step as everything else dries. So our bird is going to be, I'm going to have a golden style bird. And if you look at the inspiration over here, I have it printed. It's kind of more golden on top. And as you look at the body, it gets a little bit darker, which is really interesting. So one of the things that we're going to do is since we have dark colors right here, we need to put lighter colors on top of this to hold the bird's shape. So you can either use white or you can mix yellow with a little bit of white. But one thing that's going to be helpful either way is to figure out what color you want your bird to be. So I have a lemon yellow here and I have an ochre. So this is the ochre and this is the lemon yellow or a medium yellow color. I'm going to put both of these on my plate. And the bird is a little bit of orange to it too. So I have a little bit of red on my plate. I want you to mix a base color for the bird. And we're going to put a little bit of white in it. So my approach to this is that I'm going to put a little bit of yellow on my plate. We'll start there. A little bit of yellow. I'm going to put a little bit of ochre too. If you have ochre, use it. You may not have ochre. It's okay if you don't. I already have white. White is going to be an important, we're going to make a really light colored bird first. And then we're going to fill it in with darker colors because it's then going to stand out. And then we can layer on top of it, which is going to be fine. And I have a little bit of red because I'm going to make it a little bit orangey. So find a brush that you're comfortable with. I'm going to use a number 2 flat, fine, round tip brush. So I'm comfortable with drawing and painting the outlines of the birds. Maybe it's a number 5. You can use, this is a nice one too. 2, 3, 4, or 5. Any round tip brush that you like, you feel like you have the most control over. We're also going to be doing some outlining of the bird's elements. Sometimes in our classes we use pencils. If you wanted to use a pencil right now to sketch the bird on top of this, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But I'm going to mix the color of my bird first with the paints that I have. Okay. So I have yellow and ochre. I'm just going to mix some of these together. I'm going to put a little bit of, if you don't have ochre, that's fine. Just bring a little bit of white into your yellow base. So I'm bringing white into my yellow. So it has that white base. That's going to help it stand out on the black. So it's going to be lighter initially. It's okay. We're going to be painting over some of this. We want it to stand out on the black. If you wanted to add a tiny bit of red, you can do that to make it a little orangey. Absolutely fine. This is just a base color. So I'm going to give everybody a minute to mix a color they like, and then I'll go through some of the placement options and the size of the bird, etc. So I like to spin my paintbrush on my palette to manage the paint, the amount of paint on the brush. The more you paint, the more familiar you get with how to use how much paint on your brush and how to use your brushes in a way that, meet your needs. New painters don't always think about that, but it's kind of like, I used this analogy the other day, is like when you cook in the kitchen, you know what tools you need to grab to make the dish the way that you want to make your dish. Same thing with brushes. You figure out what brushes you want to use to, meet and exceed those needs. So let's talk about the composition and the placement of the bird. For me, the bird's going to go in the middle, and I like to use my hands in these classes because I like to I like to measure like how high I want the bird and the position. So if I want the top of my bird maybe to be up here and the tail feathers to be down here, I can put a small dot in the middle on where I want the top of my head to be. And then down here, I can have where I want the tail feathers to end. So I'm doing placement and I'm doing size at the same time, just with a dotting technique like this, okay? Now, next, let's do the bird's head. Let's start on the smaller size of the bird's head. And you can start out with just doing kind of like a little bit of a rainbow. And you can make your rainbow a little bigger. And I'm keeping it just like this because the bird's body, we're not going to have a round head on top of the bird. We can change the shape of the head too as we go. But to start with a little rainbow for the top of the bird's head. Go back and get a little more paint. And then the bird's body is fairly round. Maybe underneath the rainbow, it can get a little boxy and it can come out. You're going to do kind of a rounded rectangle for the shape of the bird. And the tail feathers are long, so be conscious of bottom of the body gets a little bit more narrow. We're just doing basic shapes. And then my tail feathers are going to kind of come down like this, just to give you a little bit of perspective here. I can add wings. I can change the shape of my bird's body, but I'm starting somewhere. So let's focus on the bird's body a little bit. It's more straight and narrow. Maybe the shoulders are a little more broad up top. And then it comes down and it gets a little bit more narrow. And we'll do the head after. So play with the shape of the body. And you can paint this in if you wish. We want to cover up the black on the background. And if anyone is more advanced, you can use darker colors to fill in as you go down. So like as an example, I have a little bit of ochre right here. I can bring in a little bit of the ochre. My lighting is not good right here. Let's see here. Let me bring this in a little closer for you. It's very bright. It's a little bit better. So I'm going to bring in, you can bring in a little bit of ochre down here on the bottom half if you have it. If you don't want to bring in a darker color, you don't have to. I'm just giving you alternative options. Again, everyone in these classes has different levels of experience and such. So I always like to give different tips and tricks throughout the class. So we're just going to fill this bird in. I'm going to bring this nice and close for you. There we go. So let's talk about the bird's head. The bird's head is, it's fairly boxy over here on the left side. And then it kind of comes up rounded along the top. And it rounds around the back of the neck. So the left side is a little more boxy because that's where we're going to put the beak. The beak is going to be, see the front, this left side is a little more straight. The beak is going to be this side. The bird is going to be looking this way. And this is the back side of its head over here. And if you wanted to give yourself like a little beak just to show, you can give your bird a little beak. It's going to kind of go up a little bit. And we will be putting a branch on the bird to sit on too. This is the tail. So you can kind of play with the base outline. But the objective of this step is for you to be painting the bird entirely. I don't want to see any black. And just take your time. If anyone's a little more advanced, you can start to bring in any darker colors on the bottom side of the bird. So if you wanted to use your black as an example to mix, and your red to mix maybe black and red to mix like some darker colors. Maybe for the tail, you can use the tip of your brush to start shading and creating some feather-like on the bottom side of the bird here. And this is a little bit of black and a little bit of red. It's kind of giving it a little bit of an orangish tone. The bottom side of the bird is going to be fairly dark because it's shaded. The light is going to be hitting the top side of the bird. So its tail is going to be darker. So you can see how the bird's just getting a little darker down there. We'll add some more feather-like details in a minute. Just playing with my lighting here to see if you can see that. Oh, that's so much better. You can see the bird now. Terrific. All right. Awesome. There we go. You can see the colors a little bit better now. Excuse me. All right. So we're just filling in the bird with those basic colors. And I want you to be happy with your bird's shape. And you can use the tip of your brush to play with some of this feather-like detail. So again, I'm staying below the shoulders, but I'm just adding some feathers in. And we'll add our branch in here pretty quickly for the bird to be sitting on a branch. You can play with the tail feathers a little bit. So everyone's going to start to be working on a few different things here and there. If you need to switch brushes at any point, I always love reminding you to switch brushes if you need to, because sometimes we forget. We get in a groove and we forget to switch brushes. And I'll play with my tail feathers a little bit more. I'm not incredibly happy with them yet, but it's when you paint, I encourage you to have as much patience as possible. I know it's hard, but just have some fun. Do one layer, let it dry. But I'll give everybody a few minutes to play with the bird, and then we'll do the branch, some of the branches, because we're going to let our bird dry, and we'll add more details to our bird after. If you want to give your bird a little bit of a black beak, you want to use a teeny tiny brush if you have one. It's a black beak. We'll add a little highlighting on top. And the beak it comes into the bird's head a little bit. if this helps you. It can be a little rounded. And then if you wanted to give your bird a little eye just to help your process, it's really in the middle of the head. It's a little black dot. And I'm going to fix my bird's head. It's a little small, but it's always better to start with a smaller bird's head and then make it bigger. So this is all an evolution, and this is a great time to make some of those like modification details. Kind of lean back in your chair and say, what do I need to add or change or modify? My bird's head just needs to be a little bit bigger. You can change the size of the body if you need to. That's why it's always good to start with a smaller bird too, because your birds can get pretty big if you you keep expanding your lines out, which is fine, absolutely fine. Everyone paints different sized birds in all of our classes, so it's absolutely fine. It's always a fun part of the process to see what changes. And my bird will probably change a little bit more as I get going here. And we're going to add a lot more detail to the bird from a depth perspective. But excuse me, take a minute to play with your bird, but we're going to add some more branches in just a moment. So I'm going to let my bird dry. It's a good start. And I'm going to add some black branches in just a moment. If anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Thanks again for being here. Our classes, again, are about an hour and a half to 2 hours. We're doing great with all the details. So take a few minutes to play with the bird. I'm going to let mine dry. My bird shape will probably continue to be modified a little bit. And we're going to add in some of the main branches, and the bird will be a little darker down towards the tail feathers. Maybe we add a little bit more red into our bird. If you wanted to add a little more red, we'll play a little bit with that. So I'll keep an eye on the clock. I'm going to give everyone 2 full minutes to, if you need to take a stretch break. Excuse me. If you need to work on your bird a little bit, if you just want it to dry, that's absolutely fine. But take a minute or 2, and then we'll add in some of the primary black branches in just a moment. All right. Don't hesitate to grab a cup of tea, whatever you need to do to unwind for today's class. This is a great opportunity for you to just find a little bit of time for yourself. And if you need the excuse of, if I'm taking an art class, once a month with Megan, join me twice a month, just for a little bit of time for you to practice your creativity. I would love to see you again. I offer 2 public classes a month right now. I also offer team paint classes for groups of all sizes virtually. And being based in Vermont, I love incorporating nature and flowers and the beautiful scenery around me. But we do a lot of fun and different inspirations, which you can check out my YouTube channel to see all of the options. And I also have a Patreon community, if you're not familiar with that, where it's a group of people that have come together that paint with me once or twice a month, access all of my video tutorials. I have over 40 video tutorials that are available for folks in my Patreon communities that you can check out. And today's class is for free. So if you're here checking it out, I'm so glad you're here. If you've been a part of my classes before, so glad to have you back. So we're all here for fun. All right. Yeah, so Cameron has a question around your colors are bleeding through. Cameron, I would add, if you're talking about the yellow, if you're talking about putting yellow paint on top of the black, add a lot more white to cover it up. Mixing white and yellow will really give it more substance to stand out on top of the black. So when you have really basic acrylic craft paints, which I have several in my studio, I also have Reeves, which is a little higher quality, but you can just mix white paint with it, get that white and that lighter yellow down first, let it dry, and then you can put the other colors and the other hues that you want. So if they're more oranges and more reds, you can do those after, but cover up the black by using a little bit better of a mixture first. But good questions and statements make sense. So, and if anybody has any questions after today's class, you're welcome to reach out to me through the comments on YouTube, or reach out to me on the Patreon channel. There is a link to the Patreon channel in the community within the comments in the chat below. A description. So reach out there if you need anything. I'm here to be a resource to you, answer any questions, because I know the opportunity in the process and how art can really be a positive influence on your life and a positive impact to your day. So I'm here as a full supporter of bringing art and creativity into your day-to-day life. And I'm so glad you're here. So what we're going to do next is we're going to keep moving. I am going to bring in some black primary branches. We're going to do black first, and then we're going to soften the color. If you want to do a dark gray, you could do a dark gray. I'm doing black so it stands out amongst the dark gray in the background. And you're going to use a small brush of choice. And one of the first things you can do is you can paint the branch that the bird is sitting on. That might help you, so your bird isn't floating in outer space here anymore. So with a little bit of black paint and a small brush, a brush that has, a long fine point, you're going to start in your bottom left corner, and you can come up and do a line right above the tail. Because we're going to put bird's feet right on this. So I'm going to put a little bird's foot right here. And this is not, I'm using black, but you can see what I'm doing as I'm putting in little feet. This is just to show you what we're going to be doing. And the bird's feet can kind of be hanging down on the branch, over the branch on the other side. And this line is my branch. And this can be as thick or as thin as you wish. So give your bird something to sit on. And I'm kind of going all the way off the side of the page over here. And if you wanted to do any other branches, this is where you can really just follow your intuition. We're going to do a couple of other branches. I'm just adding in a few here, secondaries. And I'm layering right on top of everything else I've already done. So this is your opportunity to add in more black branches on top of what you've already done. So I'm adding in, I'll add 2 or 3 on the left, just like we did before. If you need to hold your brush a little further back in your hand, you can. This looks very dark and eerie. I totally hear you if you're thinking that. We're going to add more leaves, don't worry. It's a little scary, right? When you're not sure what's going to happen next. I got you. Trusting the process. If you're new here, just know that it's going to look great at the end. So I'm adding in a second layer of black. I just did 2 over here, and I kind of had some of those go up and off. I added the branch under the bird. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Maybe I'll just do a couple branches, maybe one. The goal of this part is I want you to figure out where you have your gaps, and I want you to consider adding branches where you may have gaps. So I'm just adding in a few branches. And I'm laying right on top of the other reds and top of the other branches. You can add little secondary branches because we're going to put lots of leaves to really brighten the scene. And we haven't really done anything like this before. It's kind of fun. There's a lot of branches going on, so I'm going to stop pretty quickly here, but I'm having fun with it. I'm not overthinking it. So you as the artist today, you get to determine how many leaves you add, how full you want this to look, etc. So I'm going to stop there with the branches. I went a little branch crazy, but it's okay. Those branches are just going to disappear when I start adding my leaves. I promise you that. Now my bird is sitting on a branch. 2 thumbs up. The bird is not floating anymore. It's actually a little more stable. My branch is pretty small, so I think I need to make it a little bit bigger. I don't know. This bird doesn't weigh too much though. All right. So I'm going to just let this dry. And then I'm just going to let my bird, I'm just going to get to know my bird a little bit here. I'm going to say, all right, bird, I'm going to let you dry. I'm going to figure out what colors I want to add where. And then we're going to come back to the bird in a little bit. We're going to work on those bright red leaves next. So we want the black to dry. If you want to give your bird a little bit of an eye, again, we have black paint in our hand with a small brush. You can do that. If you want to give your bird a little bit of a beak, you can give your bird a little bit of a beak. If you want to give your bird little black feet, you can look at the inspiration, which is a little tricky, but they have like three little claws kind of coming down like 1, 2, 3. I'll bring it a little closer. I'm not doing anything too technical. Fairly straightforward. I have lots of branches. It's like the bird sitting on one of those bushes. If you might know the name of it, it's like one of those beautiful bushes that in the fall they had turned to these bright, beautiful, vibrant leaves. They're gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And here's the feet a little closer. I kind of just have like a little 3-prong kind of situation coming down. The most important thing with the feet is the feet come above and below the branch. Try that because he's like gripping onto it. You can consider that. There's so many different ways of painting birds and how they're sitting on branches. So just do your best. No big deal. And then I'm going to let the branches dry. And I'm going to clean off my brushes. And I'm going to prepare for my red leaves next. I'm going to make sure I have red paint on my palette. And we're going to be mixing red and white together. So I'm going to let this dry. I'll give everybody a minute. Sometimes if your canvas is really wet, sometimes people pick them up and they flip them around. They shake them in the air. But if you're new here, again, welcome. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I encourage you to do so. Sometimes I think twice a year I usually have giveaways and contests where I give away paint kits and brushes and Lake Champlain chocolates from Burlington, Vermont. Absolutely delicious. And I've given away canvas tote bags that say artists on them and different little pouches to store your brushes in. And then if you hit the notifications button, you'll get notifications when I post new videos. So I love that we're doing our YouTube Live today. I look forward to doing more of these with you. If you have any questions throughout the class, feel free to use the chat box. And if you haven't yet considered, you can follow our Patreon community even for free. So I encourage you to check out our Patreon community, which is patreon.com/paintingwithmegan. And Megan is spelled MEAGAN. It's a great space. We have some amazing people that are part of the community. And many of you some of you on the call are likely a part of the community. But it's a great place for you to just get to know others that are also like to paint and see their artwork. We love posting our art at the end of classes within that. So there's a Patreon app which is free, and you can see our community posts of what our art looks like at the end of classes. So whether you're a beginner or not, it's always fun to see how everyone does, because we all start with a simple inspiration. We all end up in our own little worlds, which is really quite fun. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do those red leaves next. So we're going to mix with a small brush of choice, your choice of what size brush, red and white together. Very important that it's red and white, because we want, if we put just red down, it's not going to stand out more clear enough for for the bird painting and for the branches. So we're mixing red and white together. It's going to give you a pinky color. Absolutely fine. I'm using like a barn red or a brilliant red color, and I'm mixing it with white. And always take your time to mix and blend a color that you like. This is just an undercoating for these leaves. And we'll go nice and slow for these leaves. As slow as possible anyways. Being mindful of time for our class tonight. So I'm going to you're going to put your leaves in lots of different places. Just pick a side and see how that's beautiful and vibrant. It's going to have a nice point on it. This one is, maybe some of your leaves are a little more narrow. So play with the width of your leaves. These will kind of look like little flowers that are kind of upward. All my leaves are they might even point down. They might open up. They can be big. They can be small. But having a little bit of a point on the end may give it a more leaf-like shape. But one of the things that I'll have you consider is the positioning of your leaves. Some of the leaves may be pointing to the left. Some of the leaves may be pointing to the right. You're going to come up with a style of your own. You can make them be little clusters of 1 and 2. You can tuck in some little leaves, little kind of dotted leaves, to make these bushes look a little more natural. So there's little buds of red. See how I have little buds of red popping through? This is the red foliage we're talking about. If you want these leaves to be a different shape, you go for it. If you want to put little white flowers and on these leaves, feel free to do that. This is your painting. So again, where you may have your own ideas, follow your intuition. But I'm going to do some longer leaves and some shorter leaves. Some may be pointing down. There may be a little leaf by his little feet right here, little buds, little red buds, right? There we go. And just take your time there. And I want you to add these leaves wherever you see fit. And we're going to add a little bit of depth to these leaves. So they might be a little bright right now. We're going to add a little bit of depth to them after. So I'm just going to focus on adding in little clusters of these leaves in different places. And they're kind of stacked, like imagine a branch. They're stacked on a branch, right? So when you see, if you go out to your yard, there's little buds and then there's bigger leaves. And imagine these little leaves are kind of alternating, stacked on one side to the other. So try not to overthink it. Just go a little crazy. Sometimes folks who paint in this step, you tend to go a little slower because you're thinking placement. But lean back in your chair and just consider, well, where else do I want to add one and why? And do I want it to be a little bigger, or have I added any little ones yet? Sometimes folks add all the bigger ones first, and they don't add some of these smaller ones. See how this looks really natural? It's because I have little ones peppered in with some bigger ones. And I'm kind of just following these up the chain, and I'm doing them on all the darker branches only. And I love doing these little tiny buds. Oh, they're so beautiful. And if the red isn't standing out well enough for you, add a little bit more white to your red for it to stand out on the black. Okay. So I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side. You can add as many or as few as you wish, just finding a style that works for you. And I love the colors. We really don't do colors like this that often. So if anybody's joined the class before, this is like really fun because we don't typically do a lot of like darker contrasting backgrounds. It's really beautiful and refreshing because we're able to appreciate this vibrant foliage with our beautiful golden bird. But again, if you wanted to bring in any orange style leaves, you can. This is where for you to kind of play with the choices and the decisions. But my suggestion is be sure to add in some of these smaller peppered in smaller leaves too, because it's going to make it look really natural for you. And I'm just using the tip of my brush and I'm leaning back in my chair. And these are all fairly vertical, but I am changing the consistency a little bit here. I'm doing little clusters of threes, maybe a little 1-2 dot cluster for those little buds. Excuse me. And just one of the things I love teaching in my classes is a little bit of mindfulness. And it's, if you've taken my classes before, you've heard me talk about this, but I like talking about it a lot because it just really brings our focus back down to what we're doing and being present with the work that we're doing. It allows us to get out of our own heads with regards to this is how it should be. And it's just about reflecting on what you have now and how you want to modify it, what more you want to add. Or if you lean back in your chair, if you go get a cup of tea and come back, you say, wow, like I'm actually doing a really good job. Like for you to take a moment to pause for yourself, to reflect on your work goes a really long way when you paint. Being reflective is a really important part of life. And sometimes we don't do it enough in positive ways that allow us just to grow and maybe make different choices, right? Whether it's what we eat or it's about who we spend our time with, or maybe we're more present around, enjoying, family time a little bit more often or whatever. So take a moment to reflect on what you're doing and say, do I have enough leaves on my branches? Megan told me to add some little ones. Do I have any little leaves on my branches? For me, I went leaf crazy. And I know that people that don't paint often a lot, you get a little timid about adding a lot. I'm going to encourage you to consider placement and size of your leaves, but pause and you're going to know when you have enough leaves, right? So I'm pretty close. I'm pretty happy with the amount of leaves that I have going on. I'm going to let this dry and we'll move on in just a few minutes. I'm going to try to keep today's class to about an hour and a half or so. For those of you who don't know, I have a 4-month-old little baby. His name is Lucian, and that my husband has. And upstairs right now, and I'm in my studio, and I have a 5-year-old son, Asher. So I can't be gone too long tonight from my family because he needs me in a little while here. But with our hour and a half tonight, I should be able to get us all through some of these basic details and allow you to make the choices if you want to do more detailed work. I'm going to empower you to do so. All right. So I'm going to give mine a minute to dry. If you're still working on those leaves, you go for it. I'm going to reflect on what I have. I will give you a couple other options for these leaves as we continue here. In our classes, we do a lot of depth techniques. So for me, I want to make sure all these leaves are painted in first. So maybe you go back through And just do a quick second coat on any of these red leaves if you need it. Now we're painting on black, so likely a little second coat touch on these leaves is not going to be a bad thing. If you need to change the color of these leaves, that little second coat might be a really nice thing because it's going to make these leaves look really much more vibrant. And you can see the difference already. I did a second coat on these leaves over here, and look at how much more vibrant they look compared to this side over here. Just a little easy second coat, and I'm not being overly, analytical with my like detail. It's just making these really stand out. And I'll do the full right side. So this is where we do second coats and we spend a little bit more time in our classes to do certain things because it really adds a lot more value and character to our picture at the end. And by doing the second coat of red, you can see clearly the difference, like more bold and vibrant compared to just a single coat of red. So it's a really good visual for our class. So I'm just going to come over here and do another second coat. Now we could spend, if this was more of like an intermediate class, or if it was a more advanced class, we would do a lot more depth techniques to bring these to life. We are going to just do really basic details for tonight's class because I want these classes to be approachable, but I'll be here to answer any questions if you really want to add additional depth techniques here and there. Okay. But I hope everybody's enjoying this so far. I absolutely love the inspiration. We're making great progress. And I just did a little second coat of red on some of these, just a little touch. So what we may do is we'll let all of our red leaves dry and we'll go back to working on our bird. And some of you may already have gone back to your bird. No big deal. I do not mind you bopping around and doing your own thing. I fully support you going at your own speed. But the bird, we're going to work our way up from the bottom. The bottom of the bird is going to be a little darker in color. So you can decide what you want that to be. I'm going to mix a little bit of my red and my yellow together. And I'm going to come up with an orange. And the inspiration, and I'm going to make it a little darker. I'm going to add a little bit of black to this. The tail is much darker. So I'm going to add some dark orange down here to the tail feathers. The tail feathers can kind of spread out a little bit. Let me see if I can do this. You can make them a little longer. It can kind of be an upside down M a little bit if you wanted to do that. But I'm going to use a darker orange and I'm just going to add in, this is going to be like a shaded area. And I'm just going to do fine little brush strokes just to add a little bit of feather-like detail down here to the tail. Now guess what? If I did something I didn't like, I can always come in and reshape an area with a little bit of black. So for me, my tail, I would need it to be a little bit more narrow. I'm going to come in and reshape it with a little bit of black. Look at that. I'm making it a little bit more narrow on the underside of the body just by using a little bit of black as like my eraser per se. See that? I just reshaped my tail with a little bit of that. But I'm going to use a little bit of the orange paint and I want the tail to be a little darker. And under the feet and on the above the line on the, you're going to add a little bit of the darker orange on the belly that's touching the branch. So I'm just adding a little bit of shading. I'll bring this a little closer if I can. A little bit of orange, darker orange, and if you need to add a little bit of black, you can. Just around the feet, around the underside of the body. Now you can use any brush you want. I'm just going to use this really simple brush, and you're just going to start, you can start to blend it in. The whole underside of the bird is pretty dark, so you can decide how dark you want to be. I'm using an orange, but it's going to gradually, it's going to stay lighter up towards the top of the head. So see how I'm using the tip of the brush with and I'm just gently giving it little bits of feathers, just coming up ever so gently. You can use a little water on your brush, a little bit. So play with your colors here, but you want to do like a little bit of a gradient kind of coming up your bird. So the shoulders and the head are very bright. And as you are hitting the midsection, it's just going to slowly tailor down to be a little bit more shaded. So just take your time here, play with the texture. The tail is going to be a little darker. It's up to you. If you want your tail to be lighter, you can pick and choose these colors, right? This is up to you. But see how this is all a little darker down here. Underneath the branch, where its butt is and where it's sitting, I'm going to make this a little darker for the shaded perspective. In the inspiration, it's much darker. I could show you what it looks like. If folks don't like it, I always love being the guinea pig in these classes, just to show you what like it could look like. I'll go much darker here so you can just see. I just added a little bit more black to give it this dark shaded color. Because this inspiration, one of the most beautiful things was the top of the bird and the shoulders are really shining. One of the things you can do is you can, with a little bit of this dark orange, you can give it a line for the bird's neck. So kind of underneath the chin here, you can give the bird a little bit of a neckline. See that? And a little bit of this dark orange behind the eye. Maybe around the eye. So we'll work on all of our darker colors first. You can, with a darker grayish black color, with darker orange color, you can give the bird a little bit of a wing. So you can do like an outline on the left side of the body. There's so many different details. With a really thin brush, you can do a little bit of a black line for like a little bit of a wing. Coming down. It's just a line that separates the brown from the edge over here. And if you don't want it to be that bold, you don't have to be that bold. I'm just playing with mixing all of my colors on my palette. You can soften this line if you wish. But I have a little wing. This is my little foot right here. I put a little bit, I'll bring this closer. I put a little bit of this brown on the top of the foot, maybe on the top of the branch here. These are all little bit of level 2 details, but you can put a little bit of this line on the top of the branch. We'll do this at the end of class, but if you wanted to try it now, to give the branch a little bit of highlighting on the top side, you can do a little bit of this brownish orange on the top side of the branches. But I did a little bit of this brown on the top of the foot. A little bit of this just to show a little bit of highlighting on top of the bird's foot right there. So you can see the feet now. There's a little bit of light coming off. So again, things I want you to consider as you're painting in your bird is how dark you want the underside of the bird to be. And we'll do the top of the bird, the head and the chest together after, but you can play with some of these other details for the moment. I'm going to play with my tail feathers down here. I'm not incredibly happy with that. That's okay. I don't strive for perfection in these classes. I strive to just try new things and be playful. If you wanted to add a little bit of a highlighted edge to the bird's tail, a little bit of a highlight on the edges, you could do that. Optional. And that's just with like a lighter yellow. But I'm just going to play with how dark I want the bird's chest to be as I work my way up. I'm using the tip of this brush. It does not have a lot of paint on it. And I'm just adding in just small sweeping brush strokes for my bird. I hope everyone's enjoying this. I'm so glad you're here with us. This is such a beautiful little painting. I love the way it's coming out. I hope that you love yours too. With a little bit of this darker orange, we can put a little bit of this shaded color on the bird's head. So just above the nose, between the eye and the nose, we're just adding a little bit of shading on the bird's face. Just a little bit. If you want to get a little fancy, you can put a little bit of like a white line on the top of the bird's nose for a lighting. Bird's beak. My beak got a little long. It's okay. It's okay. And I think I might reshape my bird's head a little bit. Everybody's going to be at different points in tonight's class. So just take a few minutes to play with the bird and the paint colors. I feel like my bird's head still needs to be a little bit bigger, maybe. So again, I'm doing the same thing you are. I'm saying, what do I need to modify or change or adjust? Maybe there needs to be a more of a slope to my bird's head. And the nice thing is you can always, if you have your bird's head and you need to reshape it, you can always use black around it to reshape it. For me, I'm making it just a little bigger. Maybe a little more rounded on top. And guess what? If I don't like anything I paint, I can always paint right over it. It's not a big deal. I love distinguishing and the fear of trying something within art classes because it's liberating to just kind of go for it. So where you wish, if you're happy with your darker colors on your bird, you can pivot to adding in some lighter colors or some brighter colors on the shoulders. So this is adding in, if you have a bright yellow, you can mix, I would suggest mixing white and yellow together for that brightness. And I'm going to do the same. It all depends on the colors you have. So I'm just going to make right under this line, make the top of the bird a little brighter. If you want it to be more bright, you can play with how you blend the colors on the head. Birds can be very complex to paint. So I would say wherever you're at in this class and your painting abilities, just do as much or as little as you wish here. If you need to pause and come back to it, a lot of folks in our classes do that. Birds, again, they can be fairly intermediate to paint. So just play with this as much or as little as you wish here. Just do gentle vertical sweeps. You can add as much or as little feather-like texture as you wish. I think my bird's head got a little too big. It's okay. I can fix it. but I'm not worried about it, which is the most important thing with the class tonight. Maybe the top of head needs to be rounded a little bit more. Oh, maybe if I round it a little bit more. There we go. A little more rounding. You can always reshape elements with a little bit of black, so don't worry too much. My bird's nose is definitely not straight, so I'm going to get a little bit of black and fix that. So we all are at our own points during class. If anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to ask. My bird's beak looks a little broken. I don't know how it got. There we go. I had to fix it a little bit. Sometimes in these classes, we do a little white dot inside of the bird's black eye. I'll do it to see what it looks like. I don't know if it's going to work for this bird or not, but you can put a little bit of a white dot on the bird's eye. I'll bring it in a little closer for you. I have like a short, stubby little bird, but he's cute. But you can see the darker contrast, right? We're creating shade on the underside of that belly, and we're creating more brightness up on the top of the chest and on the head. I just realized something that my bird needs. The yellow of the bird's head comes out onto the top of the nose, just a little bit. Just a touch. So we could easily spend, 2 hours just playing with the feather-like bird detail. And I encourage you to, if you are like motivated and you're like, this is awesome, I love painting birds. There's so many, different colors to use of this and that and here and there. I encourage you to spend more time, even after tonight's class, to be playful with this because it's quite fun as you get going. I encourage you to post your photo of your completed painting on our Patreon channel. I would love, love, love to see it. But I'm going to let my bird dry. And in our last 7 minutes here, I'm going to show you a little bit of depth technique for these red leaves. And you can also, and a little bit of technique, I'll show you for the branches as well. This is really easy. I'll do the branches first. If you have a little bit of this yellow brownish color with a really thin brush, on some of these black branches, you can do a little bit of outlining. You want it to be fairly dark, so you might need to add a little bit of black to it. But you can do a little bit of outlining, like a little bit of a light touch on some of these branches, like the top side of every branch per se. A little bit of light touching the top side of some of these branches. So I'm adding just a little bit of a brush stroke. If you need to mix a little bit of water, this color I'm using it's kind of a yellowish gray. It could be a brown too. Whatever you have that's kind of darker but has a little bit of the yellow tinge to it. And this is just a little bit of the light hitting the top side of these branches. It's just a little bit of a depth technique. I try to include as many depth techniques as possible within our class time frame, just because it will really bring your picture to life, make it look more realistic. But I'll show you a depth technique for our leaves, and then that's it. But I want to thanks folks again for being here. If you're, again, not subscribed, check out my channel, and I would love to see you again for another class. If you have any questions about the artwork tonight, definitely don't hesitate to ask. There's a couple depth techniques that we can add to tonight's inspiration. We can either add a darker red on the underside of our leaves, or we can add a lighter red to the top side of these leaves. The leaves are, they're fairly beautiful. I think I'm going to go with the darker red. So mixing red with a little bit of black and doing a little bit of an underline on the underside of these leaves will get a beautiful shading element to really allow the top side of these leaves, these red leaves, to stand out. So I'm mixing a darker red and I'm using a small brush, and I can outline or just add a little touch. And I did it up here to the underside of some of these leaves. Now you can use a tiny brush. You can use any size brush that's fairly small. And I'm just adding a little bit of darker red detail. And if you want to take your time and be very slow and deliberate, I encourage you to do that. On the outside edge of a leaf. And you can play with the blending. You could also just leave these really bright, brilliant red. That's absolutely fine too. I really love the brilliant red, so I don't want to cover these up too much. If you wanted to add a little bit of a lighter red, I'll just show you what that looks like if you wanted to consider it. Let's see here. So you could do a lighter red accent on the top side. This is really going to pop. This is if you wanted to have a little bit of an extra brighter detail. I really like the vibrant red on its own, I'm not going to lie. But you can pick and choose what details you may want to add. I'm here just to give you different options. And I'm not doing all of them. I'm just doing a little touch here and there. But I hope you all enjoyed tonight's inspiration. This was really fun. I love the bold contrasts and the beautiful bird that really stands out for what it is. I encourage you to play with bringing in some darker colors into the head a little bit amongst the the lighter colors. You want to keep the head still fairly light, but if you want to pepper in a few darks, you can. If you want to go back in and do any second coats of the vibrant red or any second coats of the yellow, art is a process. And in these classes, I try to make the windows very accessible for everyone, trying to get through some of these basics within the window. And I'm sure you all did a tremendous job. Many of us, want more time, and that's absolutely fine. So I encourage you, if you want to spend more time on your painting, to do that. You could do it now if you have the time. If anyone has any follow-up questions, you're welcome to reach out to me. My email is megan@paintandsip.com. You're welcome to reach out to me on YouTube or Patreon. Within Patreon, you can actually send me a private message, which is really nice. But I'm so glad you're here and that you made time for yourself tonight. And I look forward to seeing your artwork. But until next time, thank you all again for joining. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening. And I hope to see you again on our next class. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.